Please stand by. Good day and welcome to today's GDF SUEZ EasyFlex Product Overview webinar. All audience lines will be in a listen-only mode during the program. However, you are encouraged to submit questions throughout the conference. Simply type your question in the Ask a Question box located at the bottom left portion of your screen, and then click on the Submit button. Our speakers will address your questions at the end of the program as time permits. If you are having any technical difficulties with today's presentation, please select the Help button at the bottom of your screen for the Event Help Guide. You may download the slides at any time by clicking the Download Presentation button at the bottom of the screen. Also, a link to the recorded presentation will be sent to you via email after the webinar. At this time, for opening remarks and introductions, I will turn over the call to Michelle Robichaud. Please go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Michelle Robichaud, and I'm a Regional Vice President at GDF SUEZ Energy Resources. At this time, I want to welcome everybody to the webinar, GDF SUEZ EasyFlex Product Overview. And I'm here with Joey Moreland, who is a Key Partner Manager. We'll conclude the webinar with a question and answer session. Please note that today's web conference is being recorded. But before we dive into the presentation, there are a few images that we wanted to share with the audience. At the end of the presentation, we're going to explain the significance, so take a few minutes to look at these pictures. Okay, so let's dive in. EasyFlex is an index product that allows your customers to lock fixed prices for a percentage of actual consumption. And so here are the highlights. A price lock fixes the price for the customer's hourly shaped energy. Customers can lock up to 5 times a month with a minimum of 20% of the originally forecasted load for each lock. The structure is available on both day-ahead and real-time indexes, and it's going to include an adder similar to an index deal. So basically your adder is going to apply to the entire load, whether you've got locked positions or whether the customer is completely floating and open. Also, just like an index product, there are going to be a multitude of pass-through options available for the adder, and those would be similar to your index deal. Locks are applied to accounts based on a bill cycle month, and this product currently is only available for customers greater than 6,000 annual megawatt hours. And there's a comment here that says potentially to smaller customers based on interest, but I want to just make sure everybody is clear that we have no interest in pursuing that at this particular time. So what's next? What are some of the customer benefits? For the customer, this is a simple structure that's going to leverage both index markets yet maintain some price protection. And so for some of your customers who want more of a diversified portfolio and something simple to understand, this is one of those products. The customer is going to have the ability to adjust their amount of market exposure by executing additional locks depending on what their risk appetite is and what the market dictates. So as an example, some customers are only going to want price protection possibly during the summer months. So you may decide to work with your customers to put in a fixed price during those months. Multiple locks can target fixed prices for certain times of the year, which I just kind of mentioned. And one of the benefits for your customers is that this is a little bit more granular than a traditional block structure with better load matching. And what we mean by this is that the fixed price that is put in place is hedged to follow their load. Also, another advantage of this particular product is it's very simplified billing when you compare it to a block settlement, which has an adjustment mechanism. So what do we see as some of the benefits for our third parties or consultants? First of all, this product, it expands your portfolio product offerings that you can provide. It's a simple structure, and Joey's going to get into more of the mechanics and describing some of the simplicities of it, but it's very simple to understand and present. It's going to give you an opportunity to have more touch points with your customers. So to the extent that you want an opportunity to work with your clients to help set budgets and targets, it's going to give you those extra touch points. And this actually gives you an opportunity to expand your services by watching those market conditions and watching for those targets for creating locked fixed prices. We wanted you to also have an ability to structure a third-party fee into the price locks, which is going to broaden your fee structure options. So for example, if you're actively managing the market or watching the market for your clients, you could build in a fee working with your customers to add that into the fixed price option. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it over to Joey, who's going to get into more of the product details.
Thanks, Michelle. To start off, just to kind of put everybody on equal footing as far as what this product is and how it compares to a traditional block, we have two graphs shown here for you. The graph on the left is a representation of a traditional stipulated quantity block. And what you'll notice is the block quantity shown there in yellow is a simple flat volume every hour of the time period, and that is overlaid with the customer's actual consumption shown with the red line. You'll note that a traditional block does not follow the customer's load. It is a constant figure. And if you're familiar with the structure on the back end when it comes to billing, there is a settlement mechanism reflected on the bills to show settlements, offsets of the block quantity versus the actual load. To contrast that with the EasyFlex structure, price locks are a true percentage of the customer's actual load. And graphically on the right, that's represented by the blue shaded area. And you can see that its volume fluctuates every single hour as the customer's load fluctuates. From a billing perspective, and we'll show you a sample momentarily, this is a much easier structure to follow, that the percentage of load that is fixed shows up as one line item, and the remaining load that is not fixed shows as a second line item. With regard to the price locks themselves, we offer quite a degree of flexibility with them. First off, price locks are done in a minimum of 20% increments of your historical load. So for a given time period, you can have up to 5 locks. That's shown in the top graph there. Although the locks themselves don't have to be strictly at 20%. They can be in increments of 5% above 20%, so 20, 25, 30%, etc. Locks are done on a 7x24 basis, and locks can be executed at the time of the contract execution or at any time during the term. With regards to layering of blocks, the locks do not have to be done for the remainder of the term. So, as shown in the second graph at the bottom, there are certain time periods where your risk appetite is such that you want to lock in more fixed price and have less market exposure. You can do that. Procedurally speaking, locks must be executed 3 days prior to the delivery month. And finally, this product structure does include tolerance bands. However, those tolerance bands only apply during months where 100% of the load has been locked. To get into some more of the structural options and details, EasyFlex structure is at its core an index-based product structure. We offer this structure with a real-time index in all of our markets and with a day-ahead index in PJM, New York, and NEPOOL. The price locks themselves are conceptually a contract rider. What that means is that in the initial contract that's signed, there is additional language describing the price locks, and we'll discuss that in a little more detail momentarily. As mentioned, the locks can be executed at the same time as the initial contract or any time after the contract has been signed. Each lock, whether it's at inception or during the term, will be documented by a one-page amendment letter, and we'll show you an example of that momentarily. For clarity purposes, locks as they're discussed are expressed as a percentage of the originally forecasted usage, not the remaining open position. So for example, if you were to exercise a first lock at 40% of the load and then subsequently requested a lock of 50%, you would be locking a total of 90% of the load. However, while the estimates are done on the forecast, the locks themselves are billed on your actual usage. And we want to emphasize that as a critical feature of the product structure. And also that is a distinction of how our structure operates versus similar structures you might see from other suppliers. As Michelle mentioned, the structure includes a retail adder, and if you're familiar with our index product structures, you'll be very familiar with this. The adder applies to all consumption regardless of whether a lock has been applied or not. If an item is fixed in the adder, it's fixed for the entire term of the contract. And if an item is passed through and not included in the adder, it will not be fixed with the price lock. So it will continue to be passed through. Most of the riders that you will see on our index products you will also find available with EasyFlex. Some of those examples, that all ancillaries pass through or specific ancillary service line items can be passed through. Cap and trans tags can be passed through. ARR or CRR credits in various markets are also passed through. Line losses can be passed through. However, line loss volumes associated with locks are billed at the lock price, and we'll show you an example of that on the bill. Finally, in markets where congestion between a hub and a load zone are a question, congestion can be passed through or it can be locked. However, the treatment of congestion has to be consistent for all of your locks. I mentioned tolerance bands, just to elaborate on that a little more. The tolerance bands are selected at the time of contract execution. As I mentioned, they only come into play when a particular month has had its entire load locked 100%. And the language is all stated in the contract up front, so there are no surprises. All the band options that you would traditionally see with SUEZ on a fixed price structure, 10%, 25% MAC, etc., all those options are available within the EasyFlex. Let's look at a sample bill. So this is a sample of an actual EasyFlex customer bill, and this customer has done one lock. To walk you through step by step, the first thing I want to point out to you is the energy charge lines. And you'll see there are two lines identified. One is the price lock energy at 3,000 kilowatt hours at the stated lock price. The second line is for the remaining index portion of the load, 12,000 kilowatt hours, at the prevailing market rate. Just below that, you see the retail service charge. That's the index adder, and it applies to the full volume of usage for the period, 15,000. The next pair of lines, this particular customer did pass through line losses, and so you'll see the split out of line losses that are continuing to float with the index. You'll see that with the arrows on the right-hand side. Similarly, for the volumes that have been locked, those volumes get locked in at the lock rate. And then finally below that, beginning with the line that reads Network Integration Transmission Charge, these are various ancillary service items that this particular customer chose to pass through on their adder. Regarding contract language unique to EasyFlex, if you're familiar with our index sales confirms, the EasyFlex sales confirm will look very familiar to you, because at its heart, that's what this is an index confirm. There are a couple of pieces of new language. The first is a new paragraph regarding the price locks, and it's printed there on the screen. I'm not going to read it in its entirety, but it simply describes what a lock looks like. The second new element that's different from a traditional index contract is reference to the tolerance band or MAC language. The language that will appear in the EasyFlex contract is verbatim out of our fixed price confirms. So if you're familiar with those, it will be familiar to you. And the one exception is there is an additional modifier sentence which is shown here, which points out that the tolerance band provision only applies when 100% of the volume is locked. How do we go about executing a price lock? As mentioned earlier, a lock can be executed on the same day as the initial sales contract, or it can be executed at any time after the initial contract. For standalone price lock quotes, your SUEZ salesperson can provide those to you at any time. For the documentation of the locks, the customer must sign a price lock confirmation. There is an image of the price lock confirmation at the bottom of the screen. This is the confirmation in its entirety. It's very simple, just identifying the parties, the terms, the price, and a signature box. What about tracking your price locks for your customers? The GDF SUEZ systems track each customer's price locks internally, and your salesperson can easily share this information with you at any time if you need to know the status of your customer's locks. The image shown here is a screenshot out of our systems, so your salesperson can easily call up your customer and very quickly check the percentage locks, if any, for a given time period.
So now, just to wind things up, before we go into questions, I wanted to share the significance of the cake and puppy images. Basically, brain imaging studies show that after viewing puppies and cakes, that our field of perception is expanded wider than usual. So this allows someone to pick up more of the contextual information. So as an example, if you were shown some pictures of some people with varying backgrounds, you might remember their face, but you wouldn't remember that they were standing maybe with the ocean behind them or sitting in an office. But what these studies show is that when viewing something pleasant, that our field of perception expands. So we just wanted to make this a little fun and throw something extra in here. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to start answering some of your questions.
Okay, so our first question says, what is the settlement process for unhedged load? Can the customer choose day ahead or real time? So as far as settlement for unhedged load, it's simply priced at the market index. And that index is identified at the time of initial contract execution. So it's set then, and you can choose real-time index for any of our markets, and day-ahead index for PJM, New York, or DPool. So our next question is, when and how is the volumetric swing premium calculated and added to the retail adder to convert to a load following product? So let's talk about the tolerance bands for a second. So when we are pricing out the transaction from the beginning, our supply desk will evaluate the customer's load and identify what level of tolerance bands would be applicable to this customer. It's the same process we go through when we work up a fixed price quote. So the tolerance bands are identified that way, and we state what those are in the contract, so everything's known at the beginning. As far as the application of the tolerance bands is concerned, that tolerance band language only comes into play if and when the customer locks 100% of their load for a given month. So, as an example, if the customer signed a contract and entered one lock, and that lock was for, say, 60% of the load, and it was for the entire term of the contract, and they did nothing else, they took no other locks later on, then that tolerance band language would never come into play, because at no point during the contract would the customer have been 100% locked. Conversely, let's say the customer signs the contract and then subsequently enters one or multiple locks and for some time period has locked 100% of their load. At that point, the tolerance band language does come into play, and at that point, the price structure the customer has is in effect a fixed price structure because they've locked in their adder, they've locked in their energy via the price locks. So at that point, it's going to kind of look and feel much more like a fixed price structure.
Okay, there's a question here. It says, is this just for ERCOT or all markets? This product is actually for all markets. So anywhere that GDF SUEZ is providing electricity service, we can offer this product.
Okay. Next question, is an IDR meter a requirement for EasyFlex? No. IDR meter is not required for EasyFlex. Customers can have either an IDR meter or a scalar type meter, and it's not limited to customers with a single meter. They can have multiple meters, multiple zones, etc. Next question, can locks be done orally followed up with paper confirmation? That's not really our preference. And the lock letter, as we've shown on the screen in the presentation, that is literally the entirety of the letter. It is simple one page. It takes about 10 seconds to fill out and sign and return. So our preference is to keep the paper confirmation the way it is. Okay. Next question, is there a minimum contract term and minimum price lock term? So contract term for this product structure is no different than any of our other product structures. As far as the minimum lock is 1 month. So in a 12-month contract, as an example, you could go through 12 individual price locks if you were so inclined, doing one for each month. And then to expand beyond that, the volume size for your lock, the minimum is 20%. So conceptually, for a given month, you could do 5 locks, 20, 20, 20, 20, and 20. So for a 12-month transaction, conceptually, you could have as many as 60 individual locks. So there's a question here about giving clients the ability to lock within a billing cycle. In other words, locking for day ahead or balance of the week, balance of the month. At present time, that's not a product offering to the extent that there's a significant market demand for that degree of flexibility. I think that's something we would look into, but at this point in time, that is not available. We're just reading through a couple of the last questions here. If the customer does not lock 100% of the price, does the consumption max still apply? I think we've addressed that. The answer is no. What is your expected turnaround time from initiating the request for a lock quote to receiving the lock confirmation? So let's talk about sort of the pricing and execution mechanics of this. So on the front end, before your contract is signed, when you need price quotes from your SUEZ sales rep, we're going to be able to provide you both your adder quote and your lock price indicatively at any time, just like we provide price quotes for our fixed structures or heat rates or index structures. On the day of execution, we're going to go through sort of our regular process, and we'll provide you an executable price quote for the adder. And if the customer wants to do a lock on that same day, we will provide you that executable price as well, and provide you with all the relevant documentation to sign. So the third scenario is after the initial contract is signed and you want to look at doing a lock, and maybe that's your first lock if you've never done one, or maybe it's an incremental lock. So the price quotes are available at any time. Again, just kind of like requesting a price quote from for any of our other products. And if the customer wants to execute, we simply need to prepare the lock document. As you've seen in the illustration, that document is very simple. It'll take minutes to prepare. So the turnaround time from we give you the quote, you say you're ready to execute, to when we give you the paper is, I'm not going to say minutes, but virtually minutes, certainly less than an hour. The timing of execution should be very easy and seamless, and time-wise very consistent with our other product structures. We have a question about the ability to fix cap and trans. I will confess that I am not a cap and trans expert within the organization. However, what I will offer is that the application of cap and trans either being fixed or passed through, application of that on this product structure is going to be consistent with the options and choices you have from us with our index structures. So if it's something that can be fixed in an adder on an index structure, it'll be able to be fixed with the Easy Flex structure, and vice versa. If it's a pass-through on an index structure, it'll be a pass-through here.
And Joey, just to add to that, if you want to fix the cap and trans like you do in a fixed price, then you would be able to do that when you do your locks.
Okay. I got one last question here, it looks like. Can the broker consultant execute price locks on behalf of their customer? The answer to that is a qualified yes, and the qualification is pretty straightforward. To the extent that you have been granted agency authorization by your customer to execute on their behalf, whether that is a price lock or a sales confirm or whatever the specifics of that agency arrangement are, you'll be able to execute the price locks on the customer's behalf. What I would recommend is that if you have been granted that agency authorization by your customer, to provide that documentation to your sales rep in advance so that we have that with the customer's file, and we can proceed that much more rapidly with contract execution or lock execution. Okay. Well, we never like to end our webinars without mentioning we want to hear from our participants. You will be receiving a survey, and we encourage you to take 5 minutes of your time to provide us with input on how we did and feedback on what you would like GDF SUEZ to provide in future webinars to come. Once it is available, you will also receive a link to today's recorded webinar. Thank you again for joining us today. Please contact your GDF SUEZ sales representative for any questions about the EasyFlex product or your other electricity needs.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the conference call for today. We thank you for your participation. You may now disconnect your line and have a great day.